Here's a whole bowl full of poached eggs, and I'm just drying this one off, but I'm not going to put it on toast. I'm going to lay it on a bed of spinach and cover it with a souffle. See how to poach eggs the French way today on the French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
You know, I don't think there's anything lovelier than a poached egg, poached in the free-form French way. Just look at that elegant shape. There's sort of a careless chic about it, as if it were caught in the middle of a dance pose. But you can't poach eggs like this. You can use an egg poacher, of course, but if you want to have this lovely shape, you have to have very fresh eggs. Because if you don't have very fresh eggs, you end up with a miserable object like this. Look at the white is all mixed up and the yolk is sort of naked, and it's just a horrid thing which you wouldn't want to serve anybody. But you can always tell if an egg is fresh when you get it home by breaking it in a saucer and looking at it. That's not a very good one. I'm going to do another. I'm trying to give you an illustration of the fresh one. There, now that's quite fresh. This is a supermarket egg, but the thing to look for is that the yolk stands up high and that the white clings around it as much as possible, and there's not very much watery white that runs around it. This would say is quite a good egg. Now we're going to compare this with what I think is probably quite not a good egg, and I hope that this will show up well. It doesn't. Well, what you're supposed to see, these are both quite good. But if this one were as bad as I expected it to be, the yolk would be very flat, and there'd be an awful lot of liquid white. If you can get an egg fresh out of the hen, the whole white just coagulates around it. Now, one of your great troubles, I think, is you can break it at home and look at it, but you can't really tell when you go to the supermarket, unless you happen to live in the state that has strict laws about eggs. But in many states or in many stores, you go in and you look at an egg carton and it says strictly fresh. And that doesn't mean one thing at all unless you have some kind of egg control laws in your state. Sometimes you'll have a market that takes its eggs seriously, and they will have U.S. government inspected eggs. And look on the carton, and if you see this sign, USDA grade AA, that means you've got your best quality egg. And if you're having trouble about trying to get fresh eggs where you live, write to the governor and complain to everybody. And then say that you are lucky enough to have fresh eggs. You want to be sure that they are kept at the right temperature and the right humidity, because that makes a lot of difference in how fresh the egg stays. Strictly, it's fresh legally up to 2 weeks, but that depends on how it's kept. It has to be kept at a temperature between 50 and 60 degrees and at a humidity of 70 to 80. If it's dry and hot, the egg goes stale because the shell is porous. Air penetrates into it, and that relaxes the white. So, after this little egg talk, and you've gotten some fresh eggs, you can then poach them in the French way. I think with all of us, if we don't complain, nobody else complains. So if we want to get what we want, you just have to make your wants known. And for poaching an egg, you don't have to have any special equipment. You want to have a wide pan. I'm using a chicken fryer with about 2 inches of simmering water in it. And you want a perforated spoon, and you want a rubber spatula or a wooden spatula. You'll see why later. And you want a bowl of cold water to cool the eggs off in, and you want some vinegar, and you want a towel for draining. You'll see why you want all of this. And then, because you can't really tell unless you caught the egg out from under the hen how fresh it is, you can protect yourself. And remember, we're aiming for this lovely fresh egg and not for this nasty, disgraceful looking one. So to protect yourself, you can put the whole eggs in simmering water for 10 seconds. That's 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. I've got 5 seconds more to go. 5. And this firms them up just enough so that when you break them into the water, that they will hold their shape. And it's sort of a good thing to do unless you've been there when the hen laid the egg. And then another thing that will help also is to put some vinegar in your water. Put in about 2 tablespoons of white vinegar per quart of water. You want white vinegar because it doesn't color. And that presumably helps coagulate the white a little bit. And I find that it does help. But don't put any salt in because they say that salt discoagulates the white. In other words, give yourself every possible chance you can. And then you have your water just barely simmering, and you break the egg on the side of the pan, and then get your fingers practically in the water and drop it right in. You see that's held up quite nicely. If it hasn't held up as well as it could, immediately take your spatula and roll the egg around a little bit, and this will very often just hold it in its shape. You see that's nicely held in its shape now. And then break the rest of the eggs around in a clockwise manner so that you know where you started. Right in. And this one is held its shape so I don't have to turn it over with the spatula. Then I should have set my timer after the first one went in because it takes them 4 minutes to cook. Now I'll put in another one, hoping this will turn out as nicely as the first. That's quite nice. I'm going to turn the pan around here so that you can see. And see that gentle pushing, which you have to do very quickly because the egg coagulates so quickly. But those, I think, look very nice. Now I'm going to break one into this pan of water here so that you can see it a little more clearly. I'll break it right up into the front. Remember to get your fingers almost in the water in a clean drop. You see that's held up beautifully. Though this egg didn't really look as fresh when I broke it into the saucer, it's really held very nicely because of that 10-second simmer, and I think also because of the vinegar in the water, which has really helped it a great deal. And now you have to just wait until your 4 minutes are up. You can take an egg out, and I hope this will illustrate something. I guess this was the one I began with. Now, you will think before the 4 minutes are up that your egg is done because it looks as though the white had set. Because what you want is the white just set and the yolk runny. But, because that looks all right, cut it. And you see that that it isn't done at all. There's a lot of white that's running out. So be very careful of that. You'll think that it's done, but it really does take 4 minutes just at a very slow simmer. I mean, not quite a simmer, this almost at the simmer until they're done. Because if you took this out, it would probably break and then make everything wet all around it. So I'm going to change these eggs. I'm not going to wait the full minute for these. I'm going to put some more on. Show you some that are already done. Get these eggs out of the way. Lots of eggs here, but I think that's an interesting illustration to break it, and then you see what happens. And then as soon as your timer has gone off, you take the eggs out of the water one by one. And then you immediately put them in a bowl of cold water. And the reason you put them in the cold water is to stop the cooking immediately so that they won't get hard, and also to wash off the vinegar. And then you sort of time yourself so you remember. I think if you do a lot, you get a sort of a rhythm so that you know about how much a 4-minute is. And then if you're doing quite a lot of eggs, I think in a wide pan like this one, you can do about 6. And then as soon as you've taken one out, you break another one into the place where you took the last one out. There. Now this is what is so nice about this system, is that you can poach them way ahead of time. And they keep perfectly in the refrigerator. Just don't cover the bowl at all. Leave it uncovered. I've found that if you do cover it, they sometimes pick up an off taste, but uncovered, it'll keep 2 or 3 days in the refrigerator. And then before you're ready to serve them, you want to trim them, lift it out of the water. And if there are any sort of little whiskers, you just take a little knife and cut the whiskers off. So then you have a very neat little egg. And then, if you want to serve them cold, say, like eggs in aspic, you either refrigerate them or you just frankly put some ice into the bowl, and that will chill them. And then if you want to serve them hot, you have a pan of very hot water with salt in it. Remember, we haven't had any salt in the egg up to now. And then you want to let them heat up, and it usually takes just about a minute for it to heat through. And then you take it out of your water, and you want to drain it. So have a nice clean towel and roll it back and forth to be sure that you've gotten all the water off. And then, say you're going to serve it on a piece of toast. There it is on the toast. And then I think it's nice to put a little bit of melted butter on top. It looks very good. And a little piece of parsley. And voila, a poached egg. I don't think there's any name for a poached egg in France, because the French don't eat eggs for breakfast. They eat them for little dinners or hors d'oeuvres or first courses or luncheon dishes. And they use all of their miraculous skill of making little sauces and all kinds of things to serve the eggs with. So really, eggs in France are not for breakfast at all. And so I'm going to do a very nice luncheon dish, which will be for either a first course or a luncheon dish. And I'm going to use the eggs on a bed of spinach. And these are going to be called les œufs poachés à la Florentine. And Florentine, if you ever see it, always means spinach. And this is just plain cooked chopped spinach. I've got, about a cup here, and I'm going to flavor it up and cream it so it will be perfectly delicious for these beautiful poached eggs. And you can use frozen spinach and just drain it and squeeze it out. And then when you come to cream it, put in a bit of butter. I'll put in about a tablespoon and a half of butter or so. And then if you're going to have cream in it, you want to have a little bit of flour in so that you have thickened. You have a sort of a liaison to thicken things, and stir that around for a minute or two. And you can put in a few little chopped shallots or scallions, which always gives a good flavor, and some pepper, and a little bit of salt. I'm not giving you proportions here because they aren't very important. It just depends on how much you have. And then stir that around so that you've cooked your flour. And then I think a little bit of nutmeg is good. But not very much, just enough so that it gives a very slight taste, but you wouldn't quite know what it was. And then cream. You could use milk, but cream is always much better. So all that there was in there was just butter and about, say, a tablespoon of flour or less, and salt and pepper and a little tiny bit of nutmeg, and then cream. And this spinach, when it's just cooked this way, it hasn't been quite, it really isn't quite cooked, so you want to put in just enough cream to keep it covered and then let it simmer for 4 or 5 minutes. And I've got some that's already cooked. But you want the spinach to absorb all the cream, and it's perfectly delicious. And then when you have it all done, you want to taste it and be sure that it is absolutely delicious. Which it is. I love creamed spinach. And now, you can serve the eggs just on a bed of spinach on a platter, or you can be a little more elegant and serve it on some croutons. These are just rounds of white bread sauteed in clear butter. If you use toast, it gets soggy. You really have to saute the bread in clear butter. We've done this several times, but they're just terribly useful. And then you put the spinach on, and then you put an egg on each bit of the spinach. Well, I seem to have lost my slotted spoon, so I'll just take them out with my inimitably clean hands and put them on. This is the nice thing about having these eggs, and you can see why it is very important to poach them just enough. And what a much prettier shape this is than those ones done in an egg poacher. And now you've got to have some kind of a sauce on that, and I'm going to make a sauce based called a bouillie. And I want 1/4 cup of regular all-purpose flour and about 3/4 to 1 cup of milk. And beat the milk in gradually and beat it all around until all the lumps are out, and then set it over heat and gradually add the rest of the milk. I'm just going to add about 3/4 first and see how thick it's going to be. Seems to me we've done one of these bouillie bases before, but it makes a very nice sauce base. You could have it on hand, and you could turn it into whatever you wanted, like a sauce Bearnaise, which would be a cheese sauce. But in this case, I'm going to turn it into a souffle. And see really how quickly this goes. And this is a special non-fattening souffle because it doesn't have any butter in it. You could put butter in it if you want it, but as long as we've got butter and so forth in the spinach, I'm trying to be sensible. Then as this comes up to the boil, stir it around vigorously. Be sure there aren't any lumps in it. It lumps a little bit as it comes up to the boil, but you want it to be a very thick sauce like that. And then you're going to put in some egg yolks. But you see that's really very thick, and the egg yolks are going to thin it down. And then we have 4 egg yolks that go in. And these go right into the hot sauce. And the reason you want it hot, I'll beat it a little bit more, is because you want the hot sauce to thicken the yolks a little bit. Then you want some salt, about 1/2 teaspoon, and some pepper. And you can, again, put in just a little teeny pinch of nutmeg. As always with nutmeg, once I went to a fancy and expensive New York restaurant, and we had some spinach, and they had so much nutmeg in it that I thought it was disgusting. So what you have to do with nutmeg is just to have little in so that you wouldn't know what it was, but if it weren't in, you would miss it. I think that's very true with most herbs and spices that you use. Now that's the souffle base all made, and we now have to beat some egg whites. We want 5 egg whites, and that would be about 2/3 cup. And I'm going to beat them by hand just because I like to. You want to be sure, because it's very important in a souffle, that you have your egg whites at room temperature. Because if the egg whites are not at room temperature, they're not going to mount up, that is, foam up as much. It's getting to be a complicated sentence. I shall start over again by saying that if your egg whites are chilled, they do not mount as high, and also you may find that they make little white flecks in them. Now, whether you're beating by hand or in the machine, when you've gotten sort of a loose foam like this, you add a little pinch of salt, and if you're not beating in a copper bowl like this, you would add about 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. And the cream of tartar holds the egg whites so that they keep their form. And you want to be sure another thing with egg whites is that you have an extremely clean, dry bowl with absolutely no grease in it. Because if you have any grease in it, the egg whites won't mount. And remember always to start beating the egg whites slowly and then gradually get faster. Now that's not quite done. We want these just so that peaks stick out. That's just about it. I'm going to give them one more little whap. Now see how they hold in the wires of the whip, and they stick up in little peaks. And also what's important is that they have a lovely silky sheen to them. If you overbeat egg whites, when they say they don't beat the egg whites until they're dry, that would mean it doesn't have this lovely silky sheen. And I frankly prefer beating egg whites in the copper bowl. It seems to me that they hold up better and stand up better and are more pretty. Now I'm going to show you another illustration of when they're done. Take the bowl and turn it upside down, and the egg whites stay. So that shows that you've got them exactly right, and you're now ready to fold them into the souffle. Remember that either with the machine or by hand, the principles are the same, except in the machine you have to add a little bit of cream of tartar to hold the eggs up. Now here's your souffle base, and with any souffle, you take 1/4 of the egg whites and just frankly dump them into the bowl, and then frankly stir just to mix everything up. And this is because if you have a sauce that's rather thick, if you don't stir in some of the egg whites, the sauce is so thick that you're not going to be able to fold in the rest. And then, now this is the very important part of folding, because the idea is that you want to incorporate the egg whites into the sauce without losing any of their volume, because it's the volume that makes the souffle rise. So note this method of going down into the middle with a rubber spatula, to the side, and up and around. And at each time you are bringing a little bit of the sauce up over the egg whites. And now remember, see, I keep turning the bowl. And then towards the end, dig down underneath. But as you can see, that's a lovely soft mixture which has held its shape. And then put in about 1/2 cup of rather coarsely grated Swiss cheese. And your souffle is all ready. And this goes over the eggs. You just want a great big spoonful over each one. We've done a souffle like this using fish in the bottom. It's wonderful using poached eggs. And in this, the poached eggs are cold. And miraculously, when the souffle is done, the eggs are just heated through. Mound that up good and high. And be sure that you have buttered your platter first. Take off any little dribbles and just knock that on the floor. And then take a little bit of cheese and just about a half teaspoon and put it on the top of each egg. And there you are, and that's all ready to go into the oven. And this is to go into a preheated 375-degree oven. And put that in the upper third of the oven, and it's to bake for about 25 minutes until it's nicely puffed and browned. And when it's all done, here it is. And make sure that you serve it immediately, because sometimes with a souffle you can let it stay in the oven for 2 or 3 minutes and it won't fall. But with this one, if you let it stay 2 or 3 minutes in the oven, the eggs will become hard, and what you want is the eggs still to remain soft and runny where the yolk is. So as soon as it is puffed up the way you want it to, take it right out of the oven and then serve it. There you are. I'm going to serve you one so you'll see how it is. Then I also always like to put on a little bit of hollandaise sauce with it, because I think it needs a little bit of sauce. And I want you to see how it looks when you cut it. You see the egg is just flowing right there, getting all mixed up in the spinach, and it's perfectly delicious. And with this, I would serve a dry white wine of medium body, or you could serve a rosé. Something like a pouilly fumé would be perfectly delicious with it. So you can see why in France poached eggs are not for breakfast. They make their appearance a little later in the day. And gosh, who would think that a simple poached egg would end up like this on a Florentine bed? What a souffle little mama laid. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated. Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.